So I'm just going to go through this article about C-sections. The first thing to note really is how the number of births by caesarean section's been rising. So that's gone up from about 12% of all births globally in 2000 to 21% of all births in 2015. So between the year 2000 and 2015, it's nearly doubled. So in total, it's saying that more than 1 in 5 babies are being delivered by C-section. And this varies a lot by the area of the world as well, so by country. So in Latin America, it seems to have gone up a lot. So, so Latin America and Caribbean regions, it's used in 44% of births. And then in Africa, it's still really, really low, more like 4% of births. If we look at the US, we've got a third of births by C-section. That's 1 in 3 mothers giving birth by C-section, rather than a kind of traditional way. And that seems to have been going up as well. So basically the C-section is, as it's saying here, it's a surgical procedure. It's through a surgical opening in the lower abdomen area. They can be planned, and some of them are unplanned. It seems really complicated, kind of why this is happening, why there's so many differences across different countries, even within countries, between hospitals, between socioeconomic groups. There's probably like a huge range of factors affecting all this. It's quite difficult to get to the bottom of like a single cause, but it's really notable that I guess that it's gone up quite dramatically. It's not something that is necessarily needed in all cases. The World Health Organization, that's WHO, stated that there was no justification for any region to have a caesarean section rate higher than 10 to 15%. So that's not really saying that that's kind of the ideal rate, but it's saying actually there's no justification at all for it to kind of go over than that. And it seems a lot of countries have gone well above that. So here are the different countries. Here we can see where they are. So really kind of 44% in Latin America, Caribbean, 32% in North America, approaching that in Western Europe, and 28% in East Asia and Pacific as well. Much lower in Africa. And then you can really see here that difference, how it's changed from 2000 to 2015. So globally here, almost doubling in that period. Not much change in Africa. There's been an increase in Middle East and North Africa. It was already high in Latin America, and that's kind of continued upwards. North America here from 24% to 32%. Eastern Europe and Central Asia has gone up quite a bit from 11 to 27%. And Western Europe as well has gone up from 19 to 26%. So some countries where more than half of births were by C-section were Brazil at 55% in 2015, Egypt 55%, and I found this fascinating, Turkey 53%, and Venezuela at 52% in 2013. So yeah, quite interesting selection of countries where more than half of births being done by C-section. You can see the differences there. So this is quite an interesting point where countries with C-section use of 15% or more were more likely to have higher levels of socioeconomic development, women's education, urbanisation and density of physicians and lower fertility rates than countries with C-section use in less than 10% of births. So for some countries, there's an association here with kind of development, women's education, urbanisation and things. And some state-by-state differences being explained next in America. And then kind of, I guess with caesarean section, in some cases obviously it's needed and is helpful. But there are sort of drawbacks with a C-section, and one of them that, apart from the general ones about kind of recovery times for the mother, and not being mobile so quickly, we've got kind of correlation with reduced breastfeeding. So that's a kind of I guess something that perhaps doesn't get touched on so much, the correlation between C-sections and the ability to breastfeed. So I think there can be just simple difficulties with when you've had that surgical procedure. It can be difficult to lift and hold the baby, and the kind of the demands of breastfeeding can become quite difficult. So that's, and as we know, kind of breastfeeding is really important for to have the best nutrition for a child, and all sorts of other kind of benefits as well. And yeah, so that's kind of, to me, quite an interesting link there. And obviously kind of just highlighting, of course there are downsides to C-section, but in some cases it can be a really kind of critical and life-saving intervention, and something that can be necessary in some cases. So really here just kind of the paper saying that worldwide there's an alarming increase in caesarean section rates. So where the kind of WHO is saying that there shouldn't really be any need for anything above than 10%, when we've got a number of countries that are going over kind of 50% of women having a C-section, then that does seem quite alarming. One of the other kind of drawbacks, I guess, that people are often quite aware of with C-section is that there can be kind of some implications for the next pregnancy. And it's a more difficult surgical procedure for the second child as well, if it's a second C-section for the second time. So you've really got to wonder whether these statistics are, you've got to sort of see that these statistics aren't very favourable in terms of kind of outcomes for women and for their babies. So yeah, just something that I found really interesting. And by us kind of focusing on, the preparing positively for a normal birth, how kind of we can all play a part in reversing these trends.